For this podcast, we're going to be going over the idea of comparing the points of view of evolutionary theory with the ideas of intelligent design. Now we're going to eliminate the ideas of creationism because the fact is we feel that people can study religious doctrine elsewhere and dogma elsewhere because it really doesn't have an actual functional purpose for what we're looking for here with this channel, and it doesn't really fit specifically when we look at the actual Old Testament of the Bible. Since it actually states two different stories, one developing a hierarchy of responsibility, the other one that actually gives an actual story that they give, and meaning to develop the idea of more of a parable style thing. I think it doesn't exactly do justice to what we're talking about here, to what we're trying to explain for the actual scientific facts. And for people that want to judge on that, I think we're talking a whole different topic that can be discussed from a different realm. You'll have other people that will believe that, and that's fine. They have the right to believe that. But this is for a whole different topic of this, and right before this, we want to get to the point of asking people to consider donating to my Patreon page. To become a patron, it's anywhere from $1 to $100, $50 and $100. We'll have a few. Once we reach the threshold, we'll have on the $50 and $100 levels, we'll have the $50 will be a Roman coin giveaway, and the $100 will be a Byzantine gold coin giveaway for those levels for anybody. And if you could read on this, you'll be able to see kind of my backstory. And there's an introduction here down here that I put on the 23rd, and that's for anybody willing to donate their hard-earned money to me to help out the channel and help out my current situation of being on disability. And you can read on to kind of see more of the issues that kind of cover that. Now, when it comes down to this, we're going to first of all go under the ideas. Obviously, people have kind of a general idea of what the idea on evolutionary theory is itself. Basically, that's starts out with the idea of the Big Bang, and then then we continue on there that creatures essentially evolved from very, very simple cell organisms and developed onto what we see today with more complex organisms. From intelligent design, the argument is basically that it was from some type of intelligent designer, and that there's some type of intervention from that perspective. It was formulated in the 1990s to refute some of the ideas of Charles Darwin himself. And it comes from the ideas of basically saying that there are certain things that essentially that we have as a point today that really can't be fully explained because they don't exactly fit into a neat puzzle under the theories of Charles Darwin. Now, what you have to understand is we'd like to go under first is we need to understand of what Charles Darwin's point he was trying to get across. It had nothing to do with trying to create some type of evolutionary theory. We understand this on basically looking at the actual original title. It wasn't on the origin of species. That really had nothing to do with it. It was you have to look at the whole title, which a lot of people tend to ignore. It was on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in a struggle for life. You have to understand that he was a eugenicist. He was essentially looking to prove that races that were not white were inferior. And this was what he was trying to bring across. And he was essentially trying to prove that people that were black were inferior to those who were white, as well as those who were Asian and Latino and other groups as that were essentially inferior. So it wasn't that he was necessarily trying to prove anything about evolutionary theory of other species. This was merely nothing more than coincidence within his actual research that he had found. And it was nothing more than an actual it was nothing more than being incidental from his actual research of what his initial purpose was. Now, what we can do is, now most of his points were actually from his incidental research can actually be taken as fact, but there's some points that we can see that there's kind of holes in with it. Now, when we look at the most of the chromosomal numbers of primates, we'll see that are actually closely related. We'll see such things as like the humans are at 46. We'll see the orangutans, gorillas, and chimpanzees at 48, so very, very close numbers. And we'll see the goes up to about the number of the capuchin monkeys at about 54. Now this is actually where it tends to peak at. Except for one little problem there. Let's look at the case of the Philippine Tarsier, which is also a actual primate. If you take a look at this picture right here, you can see that it actually is a primate. It's actually this, one of the this section physical illustration. If you look at the, we'll show you a picture here. We'll show you what they actually look like in a forest setting, such as right there. This is what they actually look like. Now, when we start to go back, you'll actually find out that the actual chromosome number is 80, listed right there. Now, when we start to see their actual their order is primates. They are actually listed as a primate. So now we go back to it and we start to look at the numbers of ones on 80. And you're going to be quite shocked when you see what you're going to find there. Turkey and pigeon. Now we can see that it has nothing to do with a bird. You see you'll see basic ones around there, and you'll see that they're actually nothing closely related. You'll see other ones around there is 78 for chicken. You'll see a lot of things like dogs at around 78. You'll see the dove at 78. You'll see dogs. You'll see birds. You'll see bears. You'll see the hedgehog. You will see the great white shark right there. That's obviously aquatic, but for actual like land, for actual terrestrial animals, you're gonna see birds. You're gonna see hedgehogs. You're gonna see and then you're gonna see like dogs and bears, which means that basically this is kind of poking a huge hole in this thing. This is why when we get to the idea of intelligent design, this means that we might be seeing that this is a potential idea of the theory on that there might not necessarily be many of these holes within it, but they're within the actual thing. It might be mostly based on evolution, but there's going to be a few of these holes within it that actually show that we have something. We have some of these creatures that are going to be kind of giving us this little kind of clue that there's kind of something that's kind of like just where they'll place some of these little things that are just a little bit off. And if you look at kind of like the thing of the Philippine Tarsier, you'll see that it's not exactly something that's a normal thing. Yes, they are, and yes, they are a little bit rare because of the way that they do live, because they are very, very small. They're very small. They're very, very they can be fall the prey to owls and small carnivores. So they do, and they do live only in a specific small area. And when it comes down to it, is basically their current list is near threatened because of their situation where they are. They're very, very localized, and most of them are in a specific habitat in Baho. And that's in and you'll actually see an actual habitat out there if you go out to the Philippines. They actually have a habitat where they are protected. And when we look at that, you'll actually see that when we look at something that's small, you'll see that we can get it actually doesn't fit the normal size of primates, where a lot of the primates are much larger with it. Yes, there's another one that I believe it is actually smaller out in South America. I'm not 100% sure. I believe it is another Tarsier as well. It's in either Central or South America, but that would make I believe the Philippine Tarsier is actually the second smallest primate. And this is basically when we get to the idea of the intelligent design. When we get back to that, is we see that there's this. We get to the cases of the ideas of there's just certain things that kind of poke little holes in it. Not necessarily that we actually should accept creationism as an actual notion of anything legitimate in the scientific world, but that we should assume that there is a certain level of an intervention from some type of superior being out there, or whatever you want to make it out to be, because we do have certain things that are unexplainable from what they would be, and they do not fit to any level of ideas of evolution as we know it, because evolution would theoretically explain it as this is a whole anomaly, and theoretically you would try to explain it off as an actual mutation. But we know that it's not a mutation because this is an actual legitimate species. It's not some offshoot of a species, because this is something that we've had existing for quite some time. These aren't exactly things that are some offshoot of another species. They are their own species that have existed for countless generations, and if they were just some mutation, then essentially you wouldn't be getting the numbers like you have. And that's why when you get these things, and you'll find other things out there that are essentially cases to where this ends up happening. and it could be through one of many different types of factors, where it could be chromosome number, it could be something else, it could be what something ends up happening. And if you start to look at the list of the organisms, you could see that there's certain things that just don't end up applying. And you'll see that certain things just won't end up fitting into what the normal ones should. And each one of these is going to be slightly different. Obviously, this is the list from Wikipedia is actually very, very small, because it only lists a certain number of things to give you a general idea. But you'll obviously there will be obviously a lot of other things that do not fit into this narrow idea of what we have. And when we see that, you'll see that eventually we find these different things that are definitely a problem. And when we start to look at them, you'll see that you could find things that are quite different from each of the different points of where they should be. I mean, you could find, I mean, it could be basically where we could find that the I mean, we could end up finding, and this is why when we look out there, we're finding different creatures that just don't exist, and that we thought shouldn't exist. And it's just something that is very, very unique. And this is why a lot of people have jumped on the idea of intelligent design, because there are a lot of anomalies that are not just to the idea of they're not just to the idea of what we have, what would be an actual mutation, but or have actually stood with it. And there's going to be certain people that have tried to refute it with it, but and the fact is it doesn't really fit to what we have with what we have the actual facts of. And you can actually put facts in front of their face, and they usually tend to state, well, that's they're one of those anomalies, and they tend to state that's an anomaly of science, and they really don't have an answer with it. And when you can put facts in front of their face that cite your point, and yet they have to state that, oh, that's an anomaly, they really can't argue against it, because currently, if they have to state, oh, that's an anomaly for their theory, that means their theory has a huge crack in it. And you have to go with the theories that are a lot more sound. And until there's something in which you can prove some type of a sound theory, we would have to, that's solely based on science, and not showing that a third party could have some type of a intervention into what we're seeing in our world, we cannot accept really the idea of evolution. I know that they want to stick to the idea of evolution and natural selection. And yes, there's a lot of things that could be had through natural mutation and what we see with it. And intelligent design does accept those, but they understand that there are things of intervention that do not take into it, and they don't assume, and they don't. This is something that they do not assume with it. What proponents against it, they tend to grasp onto, is they tend to assume that intelligent design and creationism are one and the same, and they're really not. They've actually, intelligent design actually takes the theory of evolution and states that, okay, evolution has its massive holes with it, and it says that there is some third party that is actually intervening to cause these different anomalies, and this is what is the cause. It's not they're not actually people who actually believe necessarily in creationism. And when people who are opponents of intelligent design are actually trying to conflate the two, they're actually coming up with a very, very weak argument. And this is why if you have to come up with a very, very weak argument and conflating two specific different groups, because essentially what we have here are three separate arguments. You have the people who have the argument for evolution, you have the argument for creation, and the argument of intelligent design. It's three separate arguments. There's not one of them are the same. One says that the intelligent design says they believe in many of the aspects of evolution, but they believe that there's a third-party intervention that basically creates these anomalies. Now you have the evolution, which believes in the theory of Charles Darwin, and it believes that is 100% sound, regardless of whatever evidence is brought forth to poke holes in it. Then you have the creationism, which believes in creationism 100%, and it doesn't matter what people use with either intelligent design nor evolution to poke holes in it. They believe in 100%. And that's where we get at that, and that's where we see the three arguments. And with this one, we actually, the only one that actually is shown to be a sound argument to this date is intelligent design, because it's the only one not showing a weakness. It's saying that there is some type of intervention. It doesn't matter what you want to say that intervention is. People could, even the people that are saying that we're living in a some type of a computer generated animation, and that's what our universe is. Technically, that fits under the idea of intelligent design, and that would assume that we're living in some type of a third-party intervention. Anything that actually states that we're living in some type of a third-party intervention, regardless of what way you're believing, if you believe that that is a god or whatever type of reason you're believing in, that puts that idea out. Now, people have used the idea to support such things as either a god, or they've used it in other scientific things, just for out in space, and say that and prove that to prove that space actually has an ending, and to state that that is from a third party intervention, regardless, and that it's just a basically we're living in a simulation. If you state that we're living in a simulation, then you must believe in intelligent design by theory, because there is no other way that you could actually believe in anything else. Neither of the other two arguments would support it, because the other two arguments believe in an actual completely natural biological system in which they're actually creating natural items. The only thing that would actually support a simulation would actually be intelligent design, which would be some type of third-party interventionist, but still allowing for the free will of the individuals, which is essentially what would actually make the most sense. Specifically, if we look at some of the religious teachings of the through Christianity, as opposed to some of the things through Judaism and some of the other teachings, we would see that it perpetuates for more free will. I know this is kind of a little bit out of the box for our normal podcast, but I thought kind of treat something on a little bit of the out of the box type of thing today, because I was doing the Liberty Awards, and do something a little bit kind of weird today. It would be kind of interesting. So if you like this, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, make sure you check out my Patreon page, and if you can't donate, make sure you give it to someone else who can, and make sure you share us on social media, and this is about it, and I will see you guys tonight for the honorable mentions, which will be part 3 of the Liberty Awards. That's about it. Bye, everyone.